What is the one decision, the single moment, without which you would not be here? Not metaphorically. Not philosophically. Literally. A decision made in the middle of the night, by a man nobody had heard of, in a bunker buried under a forest outside Moscow. A decision he had 3 minutes to make. A decision that every protocol he had ever been trained to follow told him to make one way. And he made it the other way. September 26, 1983. The world was 39 years into the Cold War. Both sides had enough nuclear weapons to end human civilization several times over. Both sides had their fingers permanently inches from a button that, once pressed, could not be unpressed. And on that night, a Soviet early warning satellite detected something. 5 American intercontinental ballistic missiles. Launched. Inbound. 3 minutes from impact. The man looking at that screen had 3 minutes to decide whether it was real. His name was Stanislav Petrov. And almost nobody alive today knows who he is. To understand what Petrov was looking at that night, you have to understand what the world felt like in the fall of 1983. This wasn't the abstract Cold War of textbooks. This was specific. Visceral. And by September of that year, more dangerous than it had been at almost any point since the Cuban Missile Crisis. 6 weeks earlier, Soviet fighter jets had shot down a Korean commercial airliner that had drifted into Soviet airspace. 269 people died. The Reagan administration called it deliberate murder. Soviet state media called it a justified act of defense. Both sides were watching each other with a level of suspicion that hadn't existed in years. And the Soviets, in particular, were afraid. Not of losing a war. Of not seeing one coming. Their greatest strategic fear was a surprise first strike and American nuclear launch so fast and so overwhelming that the Soviet Union wouldn't have time to respond before its own launch capacity was destroyed. They had built a system specifically to prevent this. A network of satellites, codenamed OKO, the Russian word for eye, positioned to watch American missile silos around the clock. If the Americans launched, OKO would see it before ground radar could, giving Soviet command the crucial extra minutes needed to launch a counterstrike. Stanislav Petrov was a lieutenant colonel assigned to the facility that monitored OKO's data. He was 44 years old. He was on duty that night partly by accident. He was filling in for a colleague. He later said he almost didn't take the shift. At 12:15 in the morning, the alarm went off. The siren was not subtle. The word that appeared on Petrov's screen, in large red letters, was the Russian equivalent of launch. 1 missile detected. American ICBM. Inbound. Protocol was clear, reported up the chain immediately. The Soviet military command would take it from there. Then the screen changed. 2 missiles. Then 3. Then 4. Then 5. The system was now reporting a full launch. 5 American ICBMs in the air, heading toward the Soviet Union. History almost ended here. Because here's what Petrov knew about what would happen next if he picked up that phone. Soviet doctrine did not call for waiting to confirm an incoming strike before responding. That would be too late. The entire point of OKO was to give just enough advance warning for a counterstrike before the incoming missiles arrived. If Petrov reported this as real, Soviet leadership would have had roughly the same 3 minutes he had right now. 3 minutes for the most senior figures in the Soviet military to decide whether to launch everything they had at the United States. And here's what the United States would then have seen, a full Soviet nuclear launch. Which would trigger the American response. Which would trigger the Soviet response to that. In under an hour, it would be over. Not a battle. Not a war in any recognizable sense. An ending. The people who built the system Petrov was sitting in front of had designed it precisely for this moment. The whole point was to take the hesitation out of the decision. The whole point was that when the alarm went off, you reported it. The alarm was going off. And Petrov wasn't sure. He had 3 minutes. Here is what he was thinking. First, the number was wrong. A genuine American first strike would not be 5 missiles. It would be hundreds, everything launched at once, designed to overwhelm Soviet defenses before a response was possible. 5 missiles made no strategic sense. 5 missiles was not how you start a nuclear war if you're trying to win it. Second, the system was new. OCO had only been operational for a short time. Petrov knew its track record. He knew it had anomalies. He knew it was not yet fully trusted even within the Soviet military establishment. Third, the ground radar wasn't confirming it. The satellite system had detected a launch. But the ground-based radar, which should have been able to see incoming missiles once they crested the horizon, was showing nothing. None of this was proof. None of this was certainty. It was judgment. And everything he had been trained to do said, when in doubt, report it. Let the people above you make the call. That is what the protocol is for. Petrov picked up the phone. He reported a system malfunction. Not a launch. A false alarm. He later said he was not sure he was right. He was 50% sure, maybe less. He said it felt less like a decision and more like a guess. He sat at his station for the next several minutes, waiting to find out if the world was ending. It wasn't. The satellites had been fooled. Sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds over North Dakota had created a signature that the OCO system misread as a missile launch. A software flaw, a gap in the algorithm, a thing that had never happened before and was never supposed to happen. The investigation confirmed it weeks later. No missiles had been launched. No attack had been coming. Now here's what I want you to sit with. At that moment, in a bunker outside Moscow, at 12:15 in the morning, one person made a decision. Not a heroic decision. Not a famous decision. Not a decision made in front of cameras or advisors or history books. A quiet decision. Made alone. In the dark. With a 3-minute clock and a 50% certainty that he was doing the right thing. And because of that decision, you are here. Your parents are here. Everyone you have ever loved is here. Every city you have ever been in is still standing. Every piece of music ever written after 1983, every film, every scientific discovery, every child born in the last 4 decades, all of it exists because one man, filling in for a colleague he almost didn't cover for, decided that 5 missiles didn't add up. The entire chain of your existence balanced on a judgment call made by someone whose name you probably hadn't heard before right now. Petrov was not celebrated. He was reprimanded, not for the decision itself, but for failing to properly fill out his logbook during the incident. He received no medal. No promotion. He was quietly reassigned, and then he retired, and then he lived in a small apartment outside Moscow, and for almost 2 decades almost nobody outside a small circle of Soviet military officials knew what had happened that night. The story only became public in 1998, when one of the officers who had been present wrote about it in his memoirs. In 2004, Petrov received an award from a World Citizen Organization in the United States. He seemed genuinely puzzled by the attention. He said he didn't understand why people made such a large thing of what he had done. He said he was just doing his job. He died in 2017. He was 77 years old. We are not the descendants of the people who built the perfect system. We are the descendants of the ones who looked at the perfect system in the worst possible moment and decided to trust their judgment over the protocol. The Cold War produced more moments like this than most people know. More near misses. More false alarms. More quiet decisions made in the dark by people whose names history never recorded. Most of them went the same way Petrov's did. Most of them, someone hesitated. Someone asked one more question. Someone decided the alarm was wrong. But not all of them. So here's the question I want to leave you with. You are Stanislav Petrov. It is 12:15 in the morning. The screen says 5 missiles. You have 3 minutes. Your training says report it. Your gut says something is wrong. The phone is in your hand. What do you do?